Kit, are you ready? I'll call the meeting of the McHenry County Zoning Board of Appeals to order. The purpose for our hearing today is application number 2024-029. This is a request for a conditional use permit to allow for a commercial solar energy facility. The applicant is Gracie Solar One, LLC. The address is 4219 West Gracie Road, McHenry, Illinois. The property consists of approximately 80 acres and is located on the south side of Gracie Road, approximately 1/4 mile east of the intersection of Gracie Road and South Illinois Route 31 in Nunda Township. The PIN number for this petition is 14-15-400-003. At this time, I would have the members of the zoning board here introduce themselves and the name of the township in which they reside, starting on my left.
Robert Cozen, Algonquin Township.
Mary Donner, Greenwood Township.
I'm Linnea Krustra in Alden Township.
Vicki Gartner, Nunda Township.
Kurt Schnabel, Riley Township.
Thomas George, Coral Township.
This petition has been reviewed and the following items have been received prior to today's scheduled hearing. The publisher's certificate of publication from a newspaper is dated May 11th, 2024, and thereby meets ordinance requirements. The affidavit of posting was signed and the date posted was May 10, 2024, and thereby meets ordinance requirements. Affidavit of mailing was signed and date mailed was May 9th, 2024. Survey has been checked against the petition, legal notice, and publication in the newspaper, and all three match. The filing fees have been paid. The endangered species consultation has been received. And the McHenry County Soil and Water Conservation District report has been received. This would be NRI number 24-046-4602. The way our hearing works, for those who maybe haven't been at one of our hearings, is that we'll hear the testimony from the applicant. There'll be asked questions from the board and also from staff. And then if there's any member of the public that would like to ask questions regarding the testimony, you have the opportunity to do so. You're allowed 3 minutes. You'll need to identify yourself, your name and your address, and then you can ask questions. And then staff will give their report. And at the end, any member of the public that wants to give a statement regarding this, it then has the opportunity to have their 3 minutes, and then there'll be closing statement by the petitioner. So anybody who will be testifying for the petitioner or any member of the public that'll be making a statement at this time, I'd like to swear you in. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, we'll turn it over to the petitioner. Please identify yourself and go ahead and give your presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board. My name is Ben Syke, and I'm a project developer with a company called New Leaf Energy. We'll be speaking tonight on behalf of our project company here, which is Gracie Solar One LLC, located here in unincorporated McHenry County in Nunda Township. So I think we know why I'm here, but I'll of course discuss our conditional use permit request and the application, of course answer any questions. And then from an agenda perspective, I'll talk a little bit about New Leaf Energy as a company, talk about the site itself, the solar project specifically, the benefits associated with that, and also walk through our compliance with the county's ordinance here as well. So again, my name is Ben Syke. I'm a senior project developer with New Leaf. I'm joined tonight by my colleagues, Nick Ballone, who's our civil project engineer on my left, Nick Stanford on my right here is our attorney from Shane Banks, Dan Marshall is our project manager from Kimberly Horn, our civil engineering consultant, and my associate Cole Bearden in back here. Didn't catch him on the slide though. So New Leaf Energy.
Make the slide, Cole. Sorry about that.
So New Leaf Energy, we have been around developing community solar projects in the United States and Illinois for an awful long time. We've been in Illinois since the 2016-2017 time period. We used to be known as Borrego Solar. Under that name, we developed several projects in McHenry County over the past several years, and hopefully more to come as well. But last summer, the summer before last, we went through a name change, and now we're known as New Leaf Energy. So my team is located here in Illinois, in Chicago, and our company's headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts. So as I mentioned, we've been in Illinois for a long time. We've permitted over 65 different projects in the state. 25 of those have been built over the past 5 or 6 years. We have 6 projects that are currently under construction, and we have another, I think, 14 or so that we expect to be building next year. And we've worked really all over the state. We've worked in Northern Illinois, Central Illinois, and we're getting into Southern Illinois as well. But the majority of our business has been in Northern Illinois and Collier counties for the most part, not Cook County. So here's a quick look at the overview of the property itself. So it's located off of 4219 West Gracie Road. It has a McHenry mailing address. It's currently owned by a gentleman by the name of Matt Porter, held by his LLC, which is MRG Farm LLC. Mr. Porter lives in Crystal Lake, so he's local here to the county. It's currently zoned agriculture. It's an 80-acre piece of property, and it's currently farmed as it is today. There is one house on the property. You can see it in this aerial view here. It's in like the northern portion where the drive in the center point of the property comes down, and that's owned by our landowner. Again, it's located in Nunda Township in section 15 there, and we're just off of 31 there. So moving on to the actual project itself. So this is a 5 megawatt community solar project. That's sort of like the boilerplate standard size for community solar these days in Illinois. I know folks have seen an awful lot of these now. It's got 13,546 panels on it. It is a tracker site, so the panels was tracked from east to west and follow the sun throughout the day as the sun moves across the sky. There is no energy storage and scope for this project, nor will there ever be at this site. The access is off of Gracie Road, and there's an existing kind of driveway apron on that corner of the road where our access road intersects.
Projector thing on that one. There you go.
So there's that access, there's an existing apron right up here. That's a good feature. And anyway, so we're not requiring a new apron there. This be existing, our access road is be gravel, basically using an existing apron. I'll note that we're not going to be removing any trees at the site. It's like a wide open field right now, and so we're able to avoid all the treed areas there. There are trees on the western, the eastern, and the southern boundaries of the property. A lot of those are just like look like large deciduous trees, no like evergreens or anything like that. There's a large collection of trees down here in the south east corner of the property. It's got some wetland features in it, and we're just avoiding that area entirely just because, one, we don't want to take trees out, and two, there's wetlands in there. So we're avoiding those wetlands, and then we were pretty conservative with our setbacks too. It's easy to do that when you've got 80 acres to work with, and you don't need 80 acres. So you can see on the eastern boundary over here, we've got, I think the setback at its narrowest is like 150 feet or so from the panel to the property line. On this side over here, the shortest I think is 86 or 89 feet, somewhere in there. And on the south side, Dan, what's the setback on the south of here?
182.
182. And of course, from the north side of the road here, we're over, I think, 800 feet or so from the road. So I think we're pretty conservative on our setbacks that we baked into it as well. It's hard to see this, so I apologize for the view, but we can go into more detail later if needed. But this is kind of like all 5 megawatt or all community solar projects in Illinois, or all solar projects in Illinois. The project itself has an access road that'll come off the main road there. At the southern terminus of that access road is a turnaround with an equipment pad that houses some general electrical equipment, switchgear, transformers, inverters, things like that. The panels are all connected to this pad by low voltage lines that are basically running to each of those panels, and they're buried underground, and they all converge at this equipment pad here. That then has one cable or one line that runs from the pad to the road, which is a buried medium voltage line. That only goes above ground at the northern terminus of that road, just for this called a pole farm, where I think it's 4 utility poles are constructed there, and ComEd takes a couple of them. That's basically where the line is connected to the existing distribution system there. And the whole property is surrounded by a 7-foot tall chain link fence, has only one access gate, which is located here. There is one, I believe there's just one motion sensor light on the property, which is located here at the equipment pad. That's downcast, it's shielded, it's dark sky compliant. It'll basically never be on or visible unless someone's actually in the facility, although it'd be a strange thing to be there at night, I guess. So talking about drainage a little bit, we doing a lot of business in Illinois, we look and think a lot about drainage in these projects, seeing as most of the areas that we develop on are agriculturally used. So the bottom line here is that after construction, the project is going to drain much in the same way it did prior to that development taking place there. And a big portion of that is considering where your drain tile is located. So as a standard practice, we consider drain tile early on in the project. We don't have a drain tile survey yet, but that's something that we look to do in the near future. Ultimately, we flag those locations for tile. And then when the actual design gets finalized, prior to pulling a building permit, you make some adjustments to avoid that tile. When you can't avoid tile or you damage it, that gets repaired or replaced in kind, which is just pursuant to the state law on that. And the actual area underneath the project area as well is all planned with all in this area here, and along a buffer around it is all planned with a native seed mix for pollinators and native grasses, things of that nature that ultimately minimize erosion, reduce the runoff, and help just preserve the ground in a much better state than it would be if you just planted nothing underneath it or left it bare dirt. As I mentioned, there would be a full drain tile survey prior to the actual commencement of construction and prior to seeking a building permit as well. Am I loud enough, by the way? Am I speaking loud enough for the?
For us, yeah.
So just a quick overview on solar. I know that the county here has seen several solar projects, but I just want to stress a couple things about this particular project, and that's that these solar projects are temporary uses of the ground, they're interim uses of the ground, right? So they're going to be in operations for 20, 30, 40 years or so. After that point, they're decommissioned, the ground's returned to that state that it was in previously. So whether our landowner wants to continue to farm it, if he wants to develop residential there, whatever they want, they're able to do. The ground isn't changed after that point. We already talked about the areas planned with a native seed mix. I'll also note too that there is no significant excavation scope for these types of projects here. The foundations, the racking, are typically driven pile or ground screw. In this part of the state, it's likely we'd be using just driven pile. But we're never using any sort of concrete fixtures or cast fixtures or anything like that. And at the end of the life, all that equipment, those improvements are removed, the above ground, the below ground, and the ground's restored to that state that it was in prior to development. So moving on to an exhibit we have for our glare study. We commissioned a glare study from a group called Barrett Energy Resources Group. They're a specialist that just focuses on glare studies for an array of different industries. And we use them for almost all of our projects in Illinois. And the takeaway that the folks at Barrett came out with was that this project, there is no expectations for glare coming off these panels. There's two key reasons as to why that is. First, because the project has a lot of natural vegetation around it that prevents any sort of glare, seeing as the glare, if there were any, it would probably be coming from the east or the west. And because you have that natural screening there, that eliminates any sort of risk of that. Second, solar panels come standard from the factory with reflective anti-glare coating. I'll also observe too that the way panels are designed, they're designed to absorb light, they're not designed to reflect it. That's an efficiency matter, so we're not viewing glare as being a risk or an issue at this particular site here. New Leaf also works with Cohn Resnick, a group that does property value impact studies here in Illinois. I'm sure the board has seen or heard from them before on other projects. The key takeaways on Cohn Resnick's research that they do, and they conduct that with township and county assessors, real estate agents, brokers, sellers, is that these projects do not have any impact on property values for adjacent properties, the conditions of sale, or the overall marketability of those projects either. So solar projects in all are not impactful on neighboring real estate values. Moving on to decommissioning. So we take the leave no trace sort of approach to decommissioning. And basically what we're saying here is, as I mentioned earlier, all the facilities and improvements that we make on this property are removed after the project is basically at the end of its useful life. So it's decommissioned, it's deconstructed, it's removed, it's returned to the state that it was in previously. Per the agricultural impact mitigation agreement, which we enter into the state, and which I believe we had a copy of right as part of the submission too. There's a decommissioning bond that's posted, of course, in McHenry County as a named beneficiary, which covers the complete cost of decommissioning the project in the unlikely event that the project company would solve it anymore, couldn't do so. The estimate, we provided a preliminary estimate in our submission here, but I think also in the ordinance there's a sort of a 10-year period there you need to look back and confirm that number is still accurate. Of course, we're more than happy to do that. I'll also note too that we didn't include salvage value in our decommissioning estimates for this project either. So as I wrap up some of these slides here, project benefits. So this project over 20 years is going to pay over $550,000 in property taxes. What I like about these solar projects is that that's just supplementing the tax base. It's not necessarily consuming services in the same way other tax-paying entities or bodies might do so. We're maintaining existing drainage, so there's no added impervious area beyond the access road and the equipment pad. You're not putting a parking lot or streets in here, or houses, whatever. It's maintaining the same kind of character that the field already had as it was today. Then again, it's a temporary use, so at the end of its useful life, if the project is complete, then the ground can be returned to farming. It can be developed, whatever a landowner wanted to do with it, they'd be able to do so. The next slides, these are several slides. I think it's 10 or 11 of them. I can walk through the solar provisions in the ordinance and just establish compliance with them. It might be a little slow and painful, so I'll try my best to be quick through them, but I think it's worth going through them regardless. So first, under site design setbacks, we already talked a little bit about the setbacks earlier on, but from the setback from the front yard and the right-of-way on the north there, I think the requirement is 50 feet, and we have proposed 880 feet. For the south, east, and west, we also, as mentioned earlier, we're pretty aggressive in our setbacks there. The west side is probably the closest, and that's 89 feet, which is still 39 feet longer than or wider than the requirement there. So again, we were pretty conservative with our approach on that. Height, so the panels themselves under site design still. So the panels, as we proposed, are 8.5 feet tall on the leading edge, so they're at max tilt, 8.5 feet tall. They'll never be above 20 feet. They'll never be close to 20 feet either. They're called like one-in-portrait panels, so it's just one panel that rotates. Some projects take 2 panels, and that's typically when you see like the higher height panels. We won't be doing that here. We just have the singles. Then for lighting, I think I already mentioned this earlier, there is one motion sensor LED light, downcast light located at the equipment pad in the property there, located in like the central and western side of the property there. And we have detail on that, of course, in our CUP sheets too, the layout sheets. For glare, we talked about glare earlier. The panel has anti-reflective glare coating. There are no buildings immediately nearby. You have existing vegetative screening nearby, so glare will not be an issue here. And then minimizing impacts on wetlands or other sensitive areas. As we talked about earlier, we are avoiding all those wetlands that are on the property there. And then, of course, we'd be complying with the stormwater management ordinance too, and avoiding any drain tile that we would be encountering on the site as well. So for F, native seed mix, we will be planting this with a native grazing and pollinator seed mix. We have some specific details on that mix and the location of that in the landscaping plan, which is Civil Sheet C 6.0 in our CUP submission. Then for fencing, this is surrounded by a 7-foot tall chain link fence. It's got a Knox box so EMS can get in there if needed. And that surrounds the entire site, which is the one access gate there on the western side. For landscape screening, because we are more than 500 feet away from any of the non-participating residences, I think we weren't required to do any additional screening here. We have screening that exists on the east, the west, and the south sides. So we don't anticipate needing to add any landscape screening here. Although actually our landowner recently shared with us that he did want to add a little bit on the north side, so we'll probably sprinkle some in there to the extent that we're able to do so. But other than that, we've, I think, established that we've complying with the ordinance as it is now. And then for monitoring and maintenance, particularly for the all the grasses and the species that are planted there, we have some details on that in our 6.0 sheet in the permit set. We also have some details on that in our project narrative and our operations and maintenance plan too.
Can you go over that a little bit, what that will be?
Yeah, we're there.
Yeah, we can show, we have a board of it as well.
Again, identify yourself, sir, please.
Oh, yes, my name is Dan Marshall. I work with Kinley Horn, which is a civil engineering consultant for New Leaf. So we can kind of show this as well, but basically it's just a native seed mix, and there's typically 2 different parts of it. Internal to the site, and I can go on board, yeah. So internal under the arrays, there's what we call like an array mix typically. It's very similar to the native pollinator seed mix, but what it has is it has less, basically vegetation that'll grow above a couple feet. The reason being for that is obviously a lot of pollinator mixes grow tall. That's kind of the point of them, is they're out there and they're more than grass, but we don't want them to shade the arrays at all. So the area in the center where you see the blue is all that array seed mix, and then all the outside is the native pollinator seed mix. And on this sheet as well, if anyone's interested, it kind of talks about the percent by weight of what like an anticipated seed mix would be. But all this is compliant with like the IDNR. So the IDNR has like a pollinator scorecard for solar farms. And then basically depending on what you do, you get certain points for it. So all this is compliant with the IDNR, basically per their specs, what they would recommend for arrays in Illinois.
Okay, thanks for that.
Talk about the AMO a little bit.
Yeah, so we're also required, of course, to enter into an agricultural impact mitigation agreement with the Illinois Department of Ag as a counterparty there, as well as the landowner. We'll have executed that prior to this date. That's, of course, included as a copy to that. I think folks are probably familiar with those, but there's a wide array of different provisions in those agreements, and one of the primary ones is around decommissioning. So the ground is required to be basically returned to the state that it was in prior to development. And of course, we have some detail on our decommissioning plan, as well as our sheets as well, our civil sheets that were attached to. And then of course also the bond that's attached to that to cover the cost of decommissioning. Again, in the unlikely event that the project would need to be, decommissioning efforts need to be financed by that bond by the county. So our access is off of West Gracie Road. I think that portion of the road there is in the jurisdiction of the Village of Prairie Grove, if I'm not mistaken. So assuming that's correct, we'd be working with them to put in place a road use agreement. And I think based on where we'd be moving construction equipment from, that goes from Gracie Road to the state highway there, Route 31. So I think we'd mostly be dealing with the village, and then once you're on the state roads, it's my understanding it's a little easier to deal with permitting.
We also reached out to Nick Standiford, 70 West Madison. We also reached out to the Village of Prairie Grove's attorney in advance to see if they had any comments on our site plan or our project as a whole, and we didn't hear anything back. We also sent out the required notices as well to the village, but so they didn't have any comment.
So for under the safety section for Bullet A, emergency management plan, we will create an emergency management plan as part of our final engineering. That's prior to construction. I'll also note too that when you built the site and before you've actually kind of flipped the switch, so to speak, and turned it on, it's standard practice for us to bring our fire and EMS folks into that site there, and they can basically learn the specifics of this unique site and this particular layout too. So they're familiar with where things are located and how our particular site is set up. And for B, signage there as well. We will have a sign on display at the entrance of the site that has the contact information. I think there's also additional signage requirements from the National Electrical Code that we'll also comply with as well. And then for C, inspection, the county and or the local fire district, EMS, they'll of course be granted access for periodic inspection whenever that would be needed. For D, damaged solar panels. All panels that are damaged, they would be damaged or destroyed, what have you, they'd be removed, they'd be repaired, and then they'd be replaced in the 60-day timeline as well. And then it's also, it's understood that any sort of debris on the ground from those panels will be removed too. And I think this is last under abandonment. So we will provide electrical power production reports, so like real-time reports of the power produced in the project upon request. And then of course, the facility would be removed or decommissioned within 12 months after an abandonment event, as the ordinance defines it. For decommissioning, so we've submitted a preliminary decommissioning plan, a preliminary decommissioning estimate, but prior to pulling a building permit, the issuance of one, then we'd be providing a more detailed and thorough decommissioning plan to correspond to those construction level design and the final design that we'd have baked at that point. And same could be said for the decommissioning estimate. So we submitted again this preliminary one at this moment, but looking forward, we'd be providing a more robust decommissioning estimate prior to issuance of the building permit. And then I think we mentioned this earlier as well, that per the requirement here in the county, that the costs would need to be reviewed every 10 years. We understand that. We will be complying with that, of course. I think that might be my last.
Can you describe community solar and how this relates?
Sure. So community solar projects are a program in Illinois where solar projects, solar developers are able to develop these projects that are intended to be subscribed to by.
You have a whole appendix?
So community solar projects are designed for folks who do not want or cannot have solar panels on the roof. It's for residential homeowners, it's for people who rent in apartments, it's for business owners, and it provides them the opportunity to be able to subscribe to these community solar projects and receive very minimal amount of savings on their bill, but they get to participate in sort of the furthering and development of solar in their communities in their state there. So the projects take subscribers, but in Illinois, all unsubscribed power gets purchased back by the utility, so here that the comment.
And then can you tell the commission here why you chose this site?
Yeah, so let me zoom to this, good enough. So in community solar, one thing I didn't talk about earlier, is that there's big distinctions between community solar projects and utility solar projects. Utility scale, they're much larger, right? And they tap these transmission systems, like these larger lines on the right over here. These are at much higher voltages. Those are interstate transmission lines. Community solar projects, they tap the distribution system over here, just like the three-phase power you see on a lot of roads in this area here. And when it comes to community solar, in a perfect world, you go out and in a perfect world, you go to contaminated properties that you couldn't develop anything on, you do solar. And sometimes we get lucky and we get to do those ones, but for the most part in Illinois, we find ourselves out in more rural areas with open ground that's flat, ideally no houses or neighbors nearby. So you screen for certain things like that, but the real important thing is the capacity on these distribution lines, on the distribution system. And in Illinois, there's just not a lot of that left. You know, community solar has been so active in the state for so many years now that it's sort of drying up, and those opportunities are getting more and more infrequent. And so one thing that we look for is the amount of capacity on those distribution lines. In this particular pocket here off of Gracie Road, there's just enough to fit this one additional project in here. Of course, I know that another applicant had their project just southeast of here, but our project and their project basically captured the remaining capacity on the power lines in this immediate area here.
Great, and I think that's it for our presentation.
Thank you.
New Leaf is a good company with a strong reputation, and as you've heard in the presentation, we believe it's a good site, so we hope that you recommend it be approved.
Well, you've done an excellent job, very comprehensive presentation. Thank you very much. You've addressed all the standards in the zoning hearing, so I'll open it up for questioning from the board. I'm starting on my left, Mr. Kozin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can you just in a narrative form your service monitoring of this facility?
Yeah, services in like what?
Your name and.
Oh, sorry, Nick, civil project engineer. The service for what? Like Ben was saying?
Thank you. Like a panel or electrical need or something arises on that?
Yeah, how do they sense whether it gets damaged or if it's performing at capacity?
Oh, yeah, I'm not, I don't know if you.
I can speak to that, yeah. So there'll be an owner and operator, so once this gets passed from here, in the ideal situation, it'll get passed on obviously to a construction company who will build it, and then someone will own and operate it. So there are a lot of large own and operating companies, energy in terms of like Invenergy, if you've heard of, or NextEra down south, so big kind of utility-based companies. And they have basically systems, they're called cab systems typically, that connect to everything. And it's kind of funny, it's almost like a war room or like a boardroom of like where you can see like a replay system, and they have all these TVs and stuff, and they are basically tracking. Obviously for them, they only make money when the panels produce energy, so they would know within a day or two that something's wrong, and typically have someone out there right away, because once again, it's hurting them to also not be producing energy. So if there's an issue, if there's damage, if there's hail, those things aren't uncommon, so they're obviously planning for that. They understand that they need to get out there and fix that as soon as possible. And then obviously per your decommissioning stuff, if something were to happen that there's not power produced for a certain amount of time, they'd also then be forced to just decommission the project.
In terms of the equipment and the panels, are these panels that are generating electricity on both sides or single side?
Yeah, these are bifacial panels. They'll be generating it on both sides, which I think is mostly just happens in the wintertime when you've got more reflection off the snow. But yeah, these are bifacial panels, so they both sides.
And then what is the highest pitch that the panels reach during the daytime?
I think it's 52 degrees.
Yeah, I think it's in our detail sheet. I don't know if you have that, but yeah, I believe it's typically 52.
Could you convert that to feet? I'm sorry, I
Oh, so
didn't do well with geometry.
well, so at its height, it's leading edge height. So I think this one is 8.5 feet
Yeah.
as it's spec.
Yep.
Yeah. I have it. Yeah. Is that what I said earlier? Yep. Okay. Yeah, 8.5 feet.
You have your array of equipment. What is the noise that is associated with the equipment that is in that particular location? And can you give it a relation to something that I would be familiar with?
Describe what the inverter sounds like.
Yeah, so, typically like right around the system, there's a ring. We usually do it in 50 feet intervals. So when you're close to it, so like 50 feet away from the inverter, I believe I don't know the exact decibel, but we have it in the spec sheet. But it's typically about the sound of like a refrigerator, 50 feet. And then as you go out 100 feet, it dissipates to like the sound of a whisper, so to speak. And then at 500 feet, it's basically inaudible.
So at 50 feet, if the inverter is located right here, 50 feet puts us still just about at the property line or so. So on that refrigerator sound would be within the bounds of the property still. And then as you step farther and farther away, like if you're standing over here, it's the same as ambient noise, basically.
Not that I've ever heard of refrigerator outdoors. Would you compare it to a compressor, a residential 2-ton compressor in the outdoors? Comparable range, 50 to 80 decibels?
Yeah, I guess it would depend on the size of the compressor that you have out there, but yeah.
Thank you. In terms of the fencing, I noticed that the fencing, at least from the illustration, seems not to be the entirety of the property, but only around the equipment. Is that a correct reading of the illustration?
Yeah, so the fence is around the entire solar array, the panels here. But it's not around the entire 80-acre property, if that's what you're asking. But just the solar array equipment, and there's an access gate. I think, it's hard to see in this photo. I think it's just right in here, Nick, right?
Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah.
Then the space between the array and the fencing is shown as a typical, if that's correct, 20 feet?
Mhm.
And is that also the space between each one of the groups of arrays, 20 feet?
No, I think between each array, it's closer to 15 or 16 feet.
Yeah, we have dimension that's about 17 and a half. That's pretty typical. So once this site goes into final engineering, the electrical engineer will look at that, but in the range of typically like 15 to 17 feet is what you'll see between the panels.
Excuse me, I see that, but I meant the east-west aisle, if you will, that separates what I'll call the four groups of the arrays.
Oh, got it. Yeah, so I don't think we have that specifically dimensioned, but once again, that's typically 20 feet or so.
Okay.
Something that is taken into account is obviously like emergency vehicles and such, so there is enough space for vehicles to get through there. Alternatively to the owner's operation, ATVs and stuff, or like mowing, they need to get through those areas, so it's typically about, we'll say 17 to 20 feet or so, taking into account that people need to access those areas.
And is there any process, a roadway agreement for Gracie Road or whoever, the maintenance? Have you contacted them or heard an opinion from them?
We haven't contacted them yet. That's something we would do prior to issuing a building, or prior to having that conversation building permit, we'd be doing that. At this point, we think it's that the jurisdiction for that road, we think is the Village of Prairie Grove right now, subject to confirmation. I think we originally thought it was a township road, and then I think now we confirmed it's Prairie Grove, but that'd be something that Nick and Dan would be working on in the near future.
Madam Chair, I have no further questions.
Ms. Dunn?
Okay, let's go back to the fencing for a minute. You're going to have chain link fence. Is there any possibility that you would be amenable to having a farm fence?
Yes.
Thank you, because I'm sure that would be something that we would ask. I know it's in the middle of nowhere behind a whole bunch of nothing, but still, it's nice for consistency, and we wouldn't want to set a precedent.
Yeah, I'm happy to, just for the know on that one. So we do, one of our other projects that we developed and built in the county here off of Salone Road.
Solon Road?
Yeah, Solon Road, and that one, I think we did that agricultural fence, and then just recently, Nick and I were trying to standardize that, and yeah, we're happy to do that. That is our preference too for this work.
So we usually defer to the communities that, you know, see what
Okay.
they want to do.
I think that would probably be our request. Do you have any more of these facilities planned for McHenry County in the near future? You've got so many to begin with, and now you've already got 2 right here in McHenry County.
Yeah, so this is the, in the near-term future now, we have just this one. We have another one that's coming along as well, but it's not unincorporated in McHenry County. Technically it's in Fox Lake,
Okay.
but still in the county. Yeah, we're in the McHenry County side of Fox Lake, so right. And then we have more, but they're like more early stage,
Sure,
you know?
that's fine, as
but we
long
do.
as we get everything settled this first time around, we'll be ready for the next one.
Yeah, certainly.
So the last thing is when you're talking about the vegetation, will you be mowing that every couple months in between the panels?
Yep,
Then
yeah,
under the
no,
panels, they'll just be, because if you want to let the vegetation grow high, well, you can't really mow that
right,
very well unless you,
yeah,
Yeah, so I don't know if it's specified in here, I'd have to look, but typically for a full landscape plan before final engineering, it'd include like an operations kind of standpoint. Typically what we see though is it's mowed like 2 to 3 times a year. So it's a slow growing pollinator mix. It will be mowed, obviously also to keep it lower than the panels and not
Right.
shade the panels.
right.
But also the goal of it is that it's not grass out there that needs to be mowed every week, so people are coming in and out of it. It'll be a couple time a year situation typically.
and if it's not mowed by conventional mower, it'd be used for grazing as well. So that's why the inside the fence is all that one mix, because typically they'll let sheep in there so they can graze, you know, inside of the fence.
So have you done any of these community ones with grazing?
Yep. Yeah, I believe most of our projects now incorporate some sort of grazing agrivoltaic component.
Most of our new projects moving
New
forward,
projects,
just
yeah.
because I think, at least in Illinois, speaking just for Illinois, yeah, I think that's more of a newer standard to try that. I have personally not yet witnessed the traveling sheep that come and do this, right, on these projects, but I'm, you know, in our New England business, we've got quite a bit of experience doing that. My understanding is I think that Illinois is trying to push all the newer projects to be conforming in line with that.
Yeah.
So some that we're speccing it for that, assuming that we would need to do it, but we've kind of planned for grazing, and if we said it conventionally mow it, we could do it either way.
Okay, I'm fine, thank you.
Ms. Jeff?
I have no questions.
Ms. Geiger?
Actually, Borrego was one of the first solar projects that came through our board. That was quite a few years ago.
Long time.
Yeah, it was a long hearing too, because it was our first. Now, you mentioned that you developed this project, but you're planning on selling it off when it's done, is that right?
That's right. So when we were operating as Borrego, we would develop the project, we would build the project, and we'd also be responsible for operating and maintaining the project too. We've changed a little bit in how we're doing business. So right now, we develop the project, we get it to like shovel-ready state, and we sell it to we have like 4 or 5 partners that we work with in Illinois who acquire these projects, and then they are the long-term owner and operator of the project as well. So we just developed them at this stage.
So by the time they get it, it's completely developed, ready to go.
It'll be shovel-ready.
What's that mean?
It means that it's fully permitted. It means the design is fully finalized. It means that they could hire a construction company that next day and go out there and procure all the equipment and then install it and operate it. When I think of shovel ready, I think of just fully permitted and entitled, basically.
So you by then have done all the, whatever needs to be done, soil testing and the drain tile
Right.
study and all of that.
Right, yeah. And actually, drain tile specific, we try to have those done by the time we show up to these hearings. Just didn't work out this time with our tile guy, but in general, we've done, like, most of the project itself has been largely de-risked with the exception of like these important permits here. And then like our Army Corps permits for any sort of, well, we'll get a letter of no permit, I guess, from the Army Corps because we're not touching wetlands. But by the time that owner and operator, by the time they acquire the project, they just have to build it and operate it.
So everything that we talk about here and whatever conditions we put forth, they are bound by those, is that
Yes,
right?
absolutely, yeah.
Okay, and you'll make sure of that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you were talking about the owner of the property asked for landscape screening on the north side. Would that be north along the road or north along the actual arrays?
I believe this is on the array, right, Cole? Yeah, so he asked for it just on this portion here of the fence
Okay.
line.
And what type of screening would you do there?
So we've only ever really had to, well, because we're always conforming to county ordinances or, municipal ordinances, and it's all oftentimes evergreen, right? So like in this part of the state, we're always specking with like eastern red cedars. That being said, I've not done it on a landowner request before, so I think I'd probably defer to him within reason, but I'm guessing he'd probably want like some sort of evergreen variety, although maybe he'll ask for Japanese maples or something, I don't know.
That would be pretty unusual. So it's just so he doesn't have to look at it, is that, because he lives on that property?
I don't think he actually lives there right now. In fact, he doesn't live there right now. He owns the house there. He doesn't live there full time. I don't know what his plans are on the northern part of the site, so perhaps he's thinking that if he wants to do something else, that he would have that screen
Or if
there.
you wanted to sell that
Yeah.
property, yeah, okay. Okay, I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Schnabel.
I have no questions.
Mr. Jers.
Yeah, could you afford me the courtesy, please, to run a few pages back, you had your setbacks. They were on the bottom half of the page.
Oh, the table?
Right, no,
This right here?
there you go, there you go. So the eastern's 172, 182, and then so your fence doesn't start till 880 feet off the road?
Correct.
Going south?
Technically, I think that's to the module, so I think it's
872.
860.
The southern 182 and the western, you're kind of tight, but that's still almost double the minimum. Okay. The rest of my colleagues have asked prior, so that's my advantage to sit at the end of the table. Most of my questions get asked by other people. I have no further questions beyond that. Oh, one more. The percentage of the 80 acres, do you have a percentage of what's inside the fence of the 80? Is it 50,
Actually, yeah.
60, whatever percent of the 80?
We should have that.
Yeah.
What's the acreage of our
So the total fenced area is gonna be 32.6 acres, and then, so it's basically all this, it's hard to see, but right here,
So 32 acres,
within the fence.
under half
Yep.
of the total
Yep,
parcel.
yep.
All right, thank you, I appreciate it.
Mr. Member, you can't make him do math, he's only an engineer.
If you wanna know the impervious, I do have that too, but I just prepared that before.
Well, it's a good thing he's not a lawyer. You know, they don't teach math in law school.
That's why I
know
went to
that?
law school.
They teach you how to divide by 3, bingo, you're a lawyer.
Well, I have an even better advantage because I don't have to ask any questions because you're finished.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you've been very good and very comprehensive in your presentation. I have no questions. How about you,
I
Steve?
have no questions.
So we have no public here, so we'll just move on to our staff report.
I'm just gonna hop over to my, right here. Okay, so the property is zoned A1 agricultural district. As we mentioned, the only other agricultural property there is the other solar project that you had seen recently that was just passed by the county board. Everything else surrounding it is the village of Prairie Grove. The surrounding land use is all agricultural in that area. You can see there's quite some distance from any adjacent subdivisions. Our future land use designation for this property is for residential. And I think we've gone through all of the other details that I had in here as well. That was the landscape plan. I think that was it.
And you feel they've met all the state?
Yes, they met all of the county and state standards.
Does anyone on the board have a question for staff? Okay, then we'll move to your closing statement, if you have one.
Just an observation for conditions, Kim. Did that
Do you want me to
include the agricultural fence? Because if you want to codify this one thing, we're just happy just to commit to doing it as well.
Yeah, when they get to the voting meeting, if they want to add that condition in, they can, so that it's in writing, we can do that. Yep.
Thank you.
No, that would help so that any buyer would see that that condition needs to be followed. But yeah, we really appreciate everyone's time and service on the zoning board here, and we look forward to hopefully getting a permit and building this project in McHenry County.
Okay, so we'll close the hearing portion of this meeting and move on to the voting portion. Again, it's petition 2024-029, a request for a conditional use permit to allow for a commercial solar energy facility with Gracie Solar One LLC. Conditions proposed by staff, I'll go through. Number 1, the conditional use shall have no time limit unless the use is abandoned as specified in 16.56.030.pp.4 of the McHenry County Unified Development Ordinance. Number 2, the site development shall be in substantial conformance with the site plan prepared by Kimley Horn, dated April 19, 2024, attached. Number 3, the decommissioning plan shall be applicable in part as well as in whole. If any portion of the commercial solar energy facility ceases to perform its intended function for more than 12 consecutive months, that portion of the facility shall be decommissioned in compliance with all the terms of the decommissioning plan. Number 4, a McHenry County stormwater management permit shall be secured prior to construction. Any damaged drainage tiles shall be repaired at the expense of the petitioner and in a manner satisfactory to the Water Resources Division Manager. Number 5, a detailed landscape plan illustrating compliance with required landscape screening standards and Illinois Department of Natural Resources pollinator scorecard standards and land management practices shall be approved by the zoning enforcement officer prior to issuance of construction/building permit. Number 6, fencing shall be provided in compliance with the National Electrical Code as applicable. The use of barbed wire is prohibited. Setting fence posts in concrete is prohibited except for gate posts and where otherwise required for stability. Is there any amendment offered for number 6?
Madam Chairman, I'd offer an amendment
Go ahead, Mr.
to
Eldridge.
provide for wooden posts and woven wire agricultural fencing.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Discussion, Mr. Eldridge.
Petitioner has indicated that they're willing to do it. It is the preferred type of fencing in McHenry County, and therefore I think we ought to include it.
Is there any more discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote. Mr. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Gartner?
Yes.
Mr. Cozen?
Yes.
Mr. Schnabel?
Yes.
Mr. Jers?
Yes.
Ms. Donner?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, so condition number 6 is amended as proposed. Number 7, recommendations made by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources in their January 15, 2024 letter to the applicants with regard to protected resources in the vicinity of a project location shall be followed. Number 8, all requirements of McHenry County Unified Development Ordinance 16.56.030.pp as amended, subject to State of Illinois Public Act 102-1123 and Public Act 103-0580, shall be met or exceeded unless specifically amended by this conditional use permit. And number 9, all other federal, state, and local laws shall be met. Are there any other proposed conditions?
Madam Chairman, I propose acceptance of the conditions as amended.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Mr. Eldridge, second by Ms. Gardner to approve the conditions. Is there any discussion? I'll call for the vote. Mr. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Cozen?
Yes.
Mr. Schnabel?
Yes.
Mr. Jers?
Yes.
And I'll vote Ms. Donner?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, so the conditions are approved 7-0. At this time, I would take a motion to approve the request for the conditional use
Madam
permit.
Chairman, I move approval of the petition, subject to the conditions.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Mr. Eldridge to approve this conditional use permit, seconded by Ms. Gardner. Discussion, Mr. Eldridge.
This is, while it is surrounded by the municipality of Prairie Grove, this is an entirely agricultural area with very few residences nearby. I believe that it is an entirely appropriate location for this kind of facility. I believe that the state standards have been met, and having met the state standard, even if I didn't like it, I would be required to vote in favor of it. So in this case, I'm doing so halfway.
Ms. Gardner.
I would echo everything that Mr. Eldridge said. I live very near this particular project, and I'm very familiar with this road. And that is an excellent choice of places to put a solar farm. There's nothing around there, and hasn't been for years. Your presentation was very good. I think that we've all learned a lot since the first Borrego presentation here. We have far less questions, and you're real succinct with your information. So I'm very much in favor. Thank you.
Mr. Cozen.
I too concur with the thoroughness of the presentation and support the motion that's before us, with the note that the reference to traveling sheep remind me of the 10-year anniversary of sheep being used at O'Hare Airport, who travel all the way from Wisconsin on a regular basis and will be seen this summer as well doing their duty. Other than that, I will be supporting the motion.
Mr. Schnabel.
I agree. I'd just like to say that out of the dozens and dozens and dozens of these solar projects that we've done, this one has by far the fewest negative potential effects in many, many different areas. So, and I'd also like to commend your presentation that you gave today as well. And I will obviously therefore be supporting the project.
I will gladly support your project for a couple of reasons. They force us to vote on these if they meet the bare minimum. And if you exceed the bare minimum, like a 50-foot setback, and you're at 51 feet, don't pat yourself on the back. But your setbacks here far exceed the minimum. It will be streetscape friendly, which I'm a big fan of. When you drive down that road, it's still going to look like a rural area. You're going to have to search twice to find a solar farm 880 feet back off the road. I commend you for that, and I will be supporting your project.
Ms. Donner.
I'm speechless. Not really, no, I could talk forever, but I agree with everyone else, and I will be supporting this.
And I agree with my colleagues. I think this meets the standards. I'm in favor of the request. So I'll call for the vote. Mr. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Cozen?
Yes.
Mr. Schnabel?
Yes.
Mr. Jers?
Yes.
Ms. Donner?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, so this will go to the county board, 7-0 approval. This time the hearing is closed. Thank you all so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
I have a real mental block approach.
I guess so. Maybe we need to just send you a text on Wednesday morning.
I think that would be very
Yeah, Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. Around noon too.
Like you're in Springfield or someplace, so you can come.
Well, that's April
74.
Oh, okay, right.
That's 50 years.
After Memorial Day.
Thank you.
Well, I
Go to the, I don't know if I told you, I go to the
Committee, right.
so thank you for coming. So, it will go to the committee of the whole.
We've all missed
Wednesdays,
Wednesdays,
but 13th is the record, so.
Time for those
So
committee
the committee meeting is at 9 on the 13th.
I didn't realize that my.
No, we don't.